So we are here and we are just about to interview Ben Shephard about his brand new book, Humble Heroes. Come on, let's go. It's going to be epic. Okay, so we're going to be doing the podcast with Ben down here. Hopefully I'll get him to sign the book. This is going to be good fun. Come on, let's go. Peter! What's going on?
Let's hug it up.
Let's hug it in. Are you ready for this?
No, I'm not sure I'm ever ready for you, Pete.
Let's talk Humble Heroes. We're going to set up first of all, but thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Ben, it's good to see you.
Lovely to see you, Peter.
Peter,
How are you?
I'm really good. Yeah, really good.
You look really well. I don't know why I sound surprised.
Yeah, well, I am. I'm extremely happy to be alive, you know, especially after last year. And I just want to take a moment to thank you because I obviously reached out to you and told you what was going on with my wife. And you were extremely kind and considerate.
Well, she's lovely.
Yeah, she is.
Yeah. I mean, she's the best part of you.
Yeah, no, she is. It's unreal. And, you know, with your book, which was something we're going to be talking about, when I first got it, I thought, hang on, there's someone missing. My wife's not in your book. But then I'm joking, when I really delved into the book and how this thing came about, I kind of understood even more about you, about the news that you were looking for. So just tell us, how did this book come about?
Just so you know, the idea that we're spinning around for another book would be miracles and the reality of miracles. And if we were to do another book based on that, then Hannah would be in that, because I think we can all acknowledge that it is a miracle that something's happened. The sort of the medical support that she's had, whatever the way that you guys live your lives, it's a miracle that she's still with us, and that's worth celebrating. And that's hope that people love to read about, right? You know, the sort of things like that happen.
Well, you know, I'm almost crying. And it's interesting because we were talking about Stephen Bartlett's podcast and how a lot of the guests cry. And this is my podcast and I'm crying. Well, I can tell you, as you well know, because you've seen my back, I've got a lot of hair on my back. And all the hair was just standing up on end when you said that, because I was thinking, well, what is a miracle? Because what I was saying not long ago is what's happened to my wife, you know, given 18 months to live 12 years ago, and then given 6 months to live last year, she's made this incredible recovery. And I was saying, this is the closest thing to a miracle. And then one day I just said to myself, hang on, it's not the closest thing. It is a miracle. Well,
if you look at, I think, you know, people will class it and classify it however they want. But if you look at where she was, the diagnosis she was given, and what you guys have been through, the fact that she's still with us, she's still full of life and smiling and happy, there's two of you together, you know, do you know what? I think one of the really important things, and it comes back to why I wrote the book, Pete, is that the two of you, because there was this opportunity to get some treatment, some pretty out there treatment in a different country, you suddenly had some hope. And hope is such a vital part of who we are and our lives and sort of our motivation and our purpose. And if you have hope, you can have all of those things. And you got given some hope. And from that small kernel of hope, you got some amazing treatment and you were able to take advantage of that. And you got some fantastic treatment. And the two of you stayed with a lot of support by friends and family, stayed really positive about what she was going through, despite the brutality of it. And, you know, she's still here now. She's still smiling and you've still got a really hairy back.
I have. We could talk about how you know I've got a hairy back, but you can listen to the podcast that we did a few years ago when we talk about the swimming costume that I wore many years ago on GMTV live to millions of people. But what's interesting about hope is there's actually a science. I don't know whether you know, there's a science of hope. I never would have known this, but the science of hope has 3 elements to it. The first element is where you believe there's a better future beyond where you are. You believe you've got agency, that you can actually do something about it. And the third element is you're prepared to take multiple pathways to get to where you want to go. And without hope, you know, it's hopeless. And when this all happened last year, there were moments I honestly felt hopeless. I felt like, in my mind, I was seeing a future where she wasn't here. I was thinking about me speaking at her funeral, but it was a few people around me who literally were just amazing, who said, you can't let that happen. You've done this before. And that's why I think it even seemed even more of a miracle. But these stories, they really do, for some people, give them hope.
Yeah.
So tell us, Where did the idea come from for this book?
Well, so we wrote, the initial idea for Humble Heroes started off on social media, and it was a sort of a reaction to the pandemic. I was working every day, so we were going into the studio, and I was fortunate enough to keep working at a time when everything closed down. Suddenly the boys were at home here, school was cancelled, work for people was cancelled. We were all experiencing this bizarre state that we'd never been through, never imagined being through. And that was really difficult for a lot of people. I was still able to go to work, though. There was an important role that we had to play, which was to share the news, to tell people what was going on, to try and inform them, to try and get the best sense of what was happening. And that was it was a responsibility. It was a huge responsibility because we understood how scared people were. From my perspective, and for lots of people, it was a remarkable time because all of a sudden, Annie and I were at home, the boys were at home at school, they were homeschooling, the weather was great, and suddenly we were all together for those few weeks, and I was going to work coming up, but we were all together, and lots of people going, it was an amazing moment that no one was working, everyone was together, we were gifted this opportunity to be together. The backdrop of that was what was happening with the pandemic that everyone was terrified about, and sadly, and I know because I've got friends and family that experienced it as well, people were dying. People were faced by this virus that was absolutely ravaging communities. So we were lucky because we were here together, we've got a bit of space, but there were lots and lots of people that were really isolated because of underlying health conditions. They couldn't go and be with other people. They had to isolate themselves away, and they got more and more marooned on their own because of the nature of the pandemic and what it was doing. And what I suddenly found myself doing, going in and sharing the news with people and the reality of that, I found myself searching for positivity and joy and hope online a lot more. I was looking for positive stories. I was looking for little viral clips of reunions of people. I was looking for that connection.
Why were you looking for that?
It was just something I needed in me because a lot of what we were sharing, the landscape at the time, the news landscape, was really, really scary, and it was really brutal.
And also one of your great friends with Kate Garraway, who you've worked with for many years, I just kind of that hit home as well because her husband was put into, he went into hospital sort of, I think it was the Derek.
Derek, before lockdown started, and then after a couple of days was put into an induced coma, and all these years later is still dealing with the after effects of COVID. 24-hour care. Their lives will never be the same again, and he's making great strides, and they're constantly looking for ways of trying to improve his condition. But he went into hospital, a relatively healthy, fully functioning adult, and he's come out as a completely different person.
And what was that like for you to present to literally millions of people every day this news? So were you looking for something positive for your own kind of sanity, for your own kind of, I need something positive?
Totally. I needed something that was going to remind me that there's hope, that there's a time when we will all be able to get back together, that this will pass. We will get back to how things were before. And being drawn to those clips online and being able to share them online with a platform that I have on Instagram or Twitter, I noticed the response I was getting was really positive as well. People were drawn to them and then sharing them on. And there was this real yearning for any sort of joy because it seemed really bleak. Everything seemed really, really bleak. What was going on with the government, what was going on in hospitals, what was going on in communities, the isolation of individual members who couldn't be with other people. My boys suddenly weren't at school with all of their mates. My cousin's daughter, who was doing her A-levels, suddenly her A-level year went. And she experienced that, the devastation of the algorithm that they decided they were going to give to A-level students and GCSE students that was then dropped a few days later because it was an absolute debacle. There was so much unease, so much confusion that was going on. So even offering something that just took your mind off what was actually happening and reminded you there are great things out there, there are people doing amazing things, we just need to sort of allow ourselves a moment to remember that, just would give me the boost that I needed to be able to go back to work the next day, share the very serious reality of what we were going through, but also hopefully offer something more personal on my platforms that will make people smile.
And if it hadn't have been for the pandemic, that might never have happened.
Okay, totally. I mean, I've always been, me, Pete. I've always been interested in people. I've always been drawn to people with amazing stories, and I've loved being able to reflect that. It just galvanized things, because what we did was we started a social media campaign on Instagram, an Instagram TV campaign, and we got people to nominate their humble heroes. The very nature of a humble hero is they're not interested in shouting about what they do. They do it because they just love doing it. They like to help their communities. They like to look after people for no reason other than they get a lot from it and they know it makes a difference. But they're not looking for any credit. They're not looking for any glory. So it had to be nominated by other people. And then we were inundated by really lovely campaigns or small community projects or individuals that were doing amazing things. And then what we did was we sort of, I would surprise them on a Zoom call. Their friends who had nominated them would get the person they'd nominated on the Zoom call, and then they'd be chatting away under some sort of guise, and then I'd pop up on a Zoom call. And then we just surprised them. And again, we weren't offering any more than just a big thank you for offering a little bit of positivity, a little bit of connection, a little bit of hope at a time when there wasn't much going on. And it was just such a magical experience doing that. And then fortunately, Bonnier, who were the publishers of the book, saw what we were doing, heard about the book, and asked me if we'd write Humble Heroes. So then we were able to collate the stories that are in the book on a much bigger platform, and here we are being able to share them now.
So it's funny just looking and reflecting on the word humble, because obviously I think you're a very humble person, right? I've known you for a long time, and you've been on television for years, and watching you on Tipping Point, you said something on the last podcast, but I've actually heard you say it before, that you realise that person is the only time they'll probably ever be on television, and you want to make sure that they have a great experience, which is a wonderful thing to do, just to recognise you can make someone's experience that much better. But I really do appreciate what you've done with these people, because you've shone a light on other people and what they're doing. And unfortunately, the way media has worked in the past is these stories are often kept from us. Why is that, do you think? Why does media tend to focus more on what's wrong and what's...
I think that there is the reality. Look, I understand the reality of news because I host a news program, and I understand the sort of the stories that sell, the people that are interested in, tend to be the seriousness of what's going on. During the pandemic, by the way, that was a really clear and apparent story that we had to tell. What was happening with the pandemic, what was going on in hospitals, what was the reality for people. And I think that is something that, someone much wiser than me once said, nothing sells like outrage. And I think that is something that people can be drawn towards. A big, loud, scary headline sometimes can be more cashable. I mean, I don't mean cash with an S, I mean it with a CHE, than a good news story. That's why the good news stories tend to be, and finally. For me personally, and I get it, people want to know the seriousness of what's happening so they're informed. But I also think that we all need a little bit of joy and fun and hope, and being able to share things like that's going to get people talking as well. And sharing some positivity is something that is a really important part of who I am. I thrive on optimism and positivity from other people. And you're talking about the essence of Tipping Point, because sometimes people say to me, gosh, so we've made 1,500 programs. Oh, Ben, don't you ever get bored? It's the same thing over again. It couldn't be further from how I feel about it. It's just such a gift to be in that scenario. For the 3 people that come in now, or the contestants that come in, it's the one and only time they're going to get to play this game that they've watched on television for 10 years now, Pete. We've been doing it.
Yeah.
I know that for the viewer at home, the best experience, the best way the show's going to go is if the person I'm playing with has the most amazing time.
Yeah.
It's the simplest thing in the world for me to share that with them and allow them to enjoy that moment, because I get so much from it as well. The consistent thing I had with all the heroes, the humble heroes in my book, is without fail, every single one of them says that the volunteering that they do, or the effort, and some of it is Herculean effort they put in to raise money for charities or to support a campaign, gives them back 100 times the amount they have to put into it. And I feel like that on Tipping Point. I get so much from the viewer and the players' enjoyment of the show.
Yeah.
That not for a minute, I could never get bored of that, because it feeds me. It just makes, it's an absolute privilege.
It's fun and it's entertaining. And let's face it, before you started, you got really well known. Entertainment was your thing, right?
Yeah.
And entertainment is so important for us to be entertained. And I suppose a lot of people find some form of entertainment in news. But these sort of stories, I think there is there's more and more people around the world that are craving to hear stories. And let's touch on some of these, because sure. I was literally just blown away. This gentleman called Errol, let's just tell us a little bit about this guy, because this is a crazy story.
Well, so Errol McKellar is a car mechanic from the East End of London who went to the doctor because he was snoring, and his wife was sick of his snoring, and went to the doctor, happened to be in there trying to find a cure for his snoring, and he saw a little leaflet saying you can get your prostate checked by having a simple blood test, a really quick blood test. He happened to be in there. He said to the doctor, "How easy is this?" "Oh, we can do it for you right now." "Great, do it for you right now." Did it then and there, thought nothing of it, gets the results and realises that he's got prostate cancer, a really advanced form of prostate cancer, and absolutely floored him. He had no expectation that was going to be the case. He only happened to do the blood test because he went in to try and sort out his snoring, because his missus sent him in to sort out his snoring. And all of a sudden, he's faced with the reality of this. Now, the brilliant thing is, as he said, my wife turned around to me and said, "Errol, it's knocked you down, it hasn't knocked you out, and we're going to fight this together." And he was able to get some medication, get some treatment, fight the prostate cancer, come out the other side, reinvigorated, and sort of reinfused about life and the reality of prostate cancer in men. He's a mechanic, so he goes back to work. Today he's gone back to work, and some bloke comes in with his car, needs his gearbox changed, and he's randomly sort of talking to the bloke about the car, and he just happened to say to him, "Pete, when was the last time you had your prostate checked?" And the bloke literally looked at him and said, "What's that got to do with my gearbox?"
Yeah.
And he's gone, "Well, look, I've just been through this scenario. I'd never had it checked. When was the last time you had it checked?" "Oh, I don't think I have." He said, "I'll tell you what I'll do. If you go and get your prostate checked, if you go to the doctor and come back and prove it to me, I'll give you 20% off your bill." And this bloke's gone, "Are you kidding?" No. Great, yeah, brilliant. So the guy's gone off, thought nothing of it. Errol's got round to sort of fixing the gearbox, no problem. The guy comes back a few days later, and he's gone, "Errol, I've got something to show you." And Errol's thinking, "Oh, crikey, this is going to cost me hundreds of pounds. What was I thinking?" And the bloke's gone, before you worry about how much it's costing, have a look at that. And the guy had tested positive for prostate cancer. The guy was able to get treatment. The guy was able to get through prostate cancer, and the guy's life is carrying on as it was, because Errol happened to say something to him at that time. Now, it's an extraordinary thing that he did, and suddenly he cottoned on to the idea that as men we can be pretty ridiculous and slow at sorting ourselves out. It's something you might not necessarily know. With all these things, the sooner you catch it, the better. If it's a simple blood test, why not do it? So he started offering this to anybody that came into his garage. If you have your prostate checked, I will give you a discount on your bill. I think 42 people have had a positive result from him doing that. Unfortunately, 2 of them passed away, which is the tragedy of it. But over 40 people's lives have been immeasurably improved because Errol got them to do this thing. And that's just the people that were tested positive. There's hundreds and hundreds that got it done and were perfectly fine. And isn't it brilliant that they know that they were clear? And then once you've had one, you're into the rhythm of having one, so you'll have another one in a year's time and another one, because everybody gets to a certain age. My dad had been diagnosed with prostate cancer when he was in his late 50s, at the same time that 2 of my best mates' dads, because they were all about the same age. All 3 of us said, "Oh, you won't believe this. My dad's just got this diagnosis." And then my mate Jim said, "Oh, my dad has 2. And my mate Mike said, "My dad has 2. And MOT yourself, which is Errol's campaign, is something that he's just got out there, and he started offering this thing. And the difference that that's making is just extraordinary. A really simple idea that taps into what it is that he does, being a car mechanic, what it is these people that are coming in, combining the 2 things to try and improve their health. It's the simplicity of it that makes it all the more powerful, I think.
And how do you think he feels now that he's in this book? Has he told you? Has he said anything?
I think everybody who I've put in the book is a little bit embarrassed about the fact I've put them in the book. They don't like the fact that they're not doing it for any sort of credit. I love the fact that I can put them there and I can shine a light on them and they can get a little bit of reflected glory because everybody deserves the credit for what they're doing. He's not doing it for himself. From his perspective, the best thing about being in the book is that more people will hear about what he's done. And even if one person picks up the book, reads it and thinks, oh, I might go and do that, then job done.
It's already happened.
Yeah.
It's bound to have happened that someone has read this.
I've done
that story.
Since meeting Errol, and I'm sort of getting to an age now, I'm 48, so I've had an MOT, and I've done it because meeting Errol and getting it, I'm thinking, I've been meaning to do this for such a long time, I'm going to stop fanning about, I'm going to go and get it done. And I had the blood test done, and already he's impacted on my life. And I know that there will be other people, we know he has, but hopefully people will read the book and go, it's a really simple thing to do.
I would really, obviously, encourage people to get the book for a few reasons. One, obviously, to be inspired by the stories, but something else I'd like to touch on, which is people seeing themselves as a hero in their own story. But we can come to that. I want to talk about a couple of other people, and forgive me for the mispronunciation of his name. You know how sometimes I've struggled with remembering names, but
Kwejo.
Yeah, Kwejo. Again, this is just an unbelievable story. Just tell us a little bit about that as well.
Kwejo is an extraordinary young man whose profile has grown and grown since he's been in the book. He's now being held up as a champion for social housing and people in social housing. Kwejo grew up on a council estate with his family in South London, battled for years and years to try and get their house sorted out. Lots of people who are living in social housing will identify with the problems that you have with these big housing landlords, to get them to come around and fix the roof, to fix leaks, to fix whatever it is, drainage problems, to fix mold, which is a really big story now. Kwejo's father was very, very ill with cancer. He got really, really fed up with what had happened and the fact that they were being ignored with regards to fixing their house, fixing their apartment, the flat that they lived in. They came round to fix the apartment because the roof was leaking, and they took the ceiling down and they just left with the bare bones of the roof and nothing else. And his father, who was really, really ill, was in a bed and there was a bare bones. There's no insulation. The back door didn't lock. All sorts of extraordinary things that they went through at a time when you desperately just want your family member to be as comfortable as possible and to help them heal. They were facing the most horrendous conditions, living conditions. And what Kwejo decided at that point was this just wasn't good enough. And he was going to start making a difference. He was going to start trying to make a difference. And what he started doing is he started documenting what he was seeing online, on Twitter particularly. And all of a sudden, this momentum started building because people started seeing the conditions that he was living in. And then he put a call out to people on his estate and what they were living in. And then it grew and it grew. And this campaign became huge. He was inundated with people offering to come around and see where we live, see what our landlord's refusing to come around and help. We've tried over and over again to try and get some help for this. And some of the footage was absolutely desperate, Pete. I mean, it was really horrible to look at. Young families, people who were ill, living in conditions that was just horrendous. And they couldn't get any support from their local authority or from the landlords at their local authority. And the thing that happens then is your self-worth just plummets because you don't feel like you have any value because your voice doesn't count. No one's listening to you. There was one woman on his estate who for 30 years had been trying to get the kitchen in her place where she lived fixed and sorted. It was in such a horrendous state of disrepair when Kwejo went round there. The cooker barely worked. Cupboards were falling off the walls. Nothing had been done for over 30 years. She'd been trying and trying to get them to come around. At that point, after 30 years, imagine how insignificant she must have felt when it came to asking for help. She'd stopped asking for help. She saw Kwejo, said, come and have a look. He was able, because he has a platform now and he has a loud voice, he was able to get them to come round. They refitted the kitchen once they saw it because he was able to shout about it. Changed this woman's life, transformed this woman's life. The kitchen is at the heart of any family.
Yeah.
And she suddenly had the ability to make food to look after her family. Still to this day, I think once a week, twice a week, once every couple of weeks, she takes food round to Kwejo to say thank you. That's the difference that he made because he gave her back her voice.
Yeah.
He gave her back her significance, her purpose, her self-worth. And the thing about Kwejo as well is that you can see the traction he's now getting, the difference that he's making. purely because he got sick and tired of what he had to go through, and he didn't want to go through it, and he didn't want anyone else to go through it as well. He's sitting down with chief government ministers now to talk about how they can deal with this properly. He is a really, really extraordinary young man that is making a difference every step of the way now.
It seems like one of the greatest emotions that people can experience is fulfillment. And it seems like fulfillment really comes from doing things for others as opposed to doing things for yourself. And it seems like you've got huge fulfillment by shining a light on other people's stories.
Yeah, I mean, it's been an absolute pleasure. I mean, it's been a real joy putting these stories together because, there's an amazing woman in the book called Shelley Hart.
Yeah.
Who's from Havering, the Havering Volunteer Centre. So Shelley was working for a volunteer centre that closed down in about 2014, 2015. She went to a local coffee shop with a bit of paper and she said to some of her friends that had been volunteering with her, if we set up a volunteering centre, would you come with me? And they said yes. She started working in this Costa coffee because it had free Wi-Fi, and she had a blank sheet of paper. I don't know exactly the figures, Pete, I can't quite remember. Come to 2022 when we did the book, she has something ridiculous. She had tens of thousands of volunteers on her book. She has saved Havering Council millions and millions, 20-odd million pounds in volunteer hours because she's able to place volunteers with all the different schemes and groups that need volunteers. And not only that, not only is she making a huge difference financially to the community that she's in, but she's making a huge difference to the lives of the people that go and volunteer. She says over and over again, the amount of times people come into the Havering Volunteer Centre, head down, looking through their fringe, not being able to make eye contact, just feeling like they need some support, they need some help, they want to do something but they're not sure what it is. She's such a force of nature. She's full of beans, full of energy. She's like, right, I've got the right thing for you. What do you like doing? Where do you want to go? What sort of thing? Is it reading with children? Is it caring for people? Is it just being at a charity to support? Whatever it might be, she gives them 4 or 5 options. They go off and try these things. And she says, without fail, when they come back, the light in their eyes is suddenly shining. They're smiling. They have a purpose. That purpose has returned to them. And by doing the volunteering, they have found their purpose. They found their fulfillment, and suddenly they're living again. And she said it happens over and over and over again. And the momentum that's built around what she has done is just extraordinary. The rollout through the pandemic, as soon as they needed volunteers to help man the vaccination centres and stuff like that, immediately she had people ready to go. She was expecting it all to happen. She got the phone call. Great. She immediately mobilised hundreds, if not thousands of people to be able to go to the various places to be able to sort out the vaccination for those people. Whatever people think about that, the vaccination and what's gone on, she was able to help that happen. She was able to help the people of her community unquestionably benefit from her drive, her energy, her enthusiasm, and deliver them purpose and joy and hope. I mean, I just think that's absolutely priceless. She's amazing. I bumped into her recently. It was so funny. I was doing an event in Hornchurch. She told me about this sensory garden that they had built. They'd saved. It was a garden in Hornchurch that was for blind people, and it was the only one in the area, and it had been going for years and years and years, and it had got run down. And she went and saw it. She said, right, we've got to sort this out. And she, with some of her volunteers, cleaned out, stripped back, replanted this entire sensory garden, purpose-built for people that are visually impaired or have visual sight problems. And I happened to be working. She told me about it. And that following weekend, I was working next door. There's this huge leisure centre that has been built. And at the time, they were thinking about taking the sensory garden to be part of the car park. And she absolutely refused to let them do it. They fought really hard. And it happened to be next door. And I got to go and see. This garden is extraordinary, Pete. It's amazing. It's the only one in the area. Anybody with visual impairment can go and enjoy it. So there's the smells, the touch, the feel, the sound. Tons of volunteers there, sort of tending to this garden or just enjoying the surroundings. And that all comes from this one woman who just decided she wanted to make a difference. And the ripple effects of that are huge, absolutely huge, because the number of people she has touched in her community goes into the hundreds of thousands, if not millions.
It's just bizarre that people don't realise they have a story and what they can do to help and inspire others. What do you want to have happen as a result of this book?
I think that's a good question. I think what I would love to think is people will take the book, they will be able to enjoy the stories, There's long stories, there's short stories. I hope they will feel moved by them. I hope they will feel inspired by them. And I hope that a few of them will think, well, if they can do that, maybe I could do something in my community. Maybe I could make a little bit of difference. And if we have 2 or 3 people that suddenly sign up to a volunteer community centre or decide that they're going to raise some money for charity, or they're going to try and make a little bit of a difference here and there, or even just look into the people that I've got in the book. Maybe if they read Errol's story, they decide, do you know what, I could do with getting my blood tested and see what happens there. That's all I want. I just want people to smile when they read it, feel inspired to want to sort of maybe do something in their own lives, because it will make them, because I come back to it over and again, I guarantee they will get more from what they try and put in than what they have to do. The commitment to do it is nothing compared to the fulfillment you get back.
Yeah, there seems to be something magical when you dedicate a life of service to others. And for the pandemic, for me, I spent a lot of time on the social media app that I've told you about, Clubhouse, where I've listened to so many people's stories. And what seems to happen, how reality is obviously mirrored sometimes in film. And you think about the most popular films with superheroes, they're the superheroes that have, like, let's come together, you know, Spider-Man working with the Hulk and Thor, and there's this kind of let's do something together. And the word hero, again, a few years ago, I saw the origin of that word. It means protector.
Right.
So that's what heroes do. They want to protect others. So let me just ask you a question. As you know, the podcast is called Future Self, and I'm really curious about people's relationship to the future. There's a very famous book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And the second habit is to begin with the end in mind. So the first habit is to be proactive in life. The second habit is to begin with the end in mind. And the author's actually referring to the end of your life. And I'm curious, when you leave, I know you've got a lot of time ahead of you, but chances are if I died, I'm sure you'd be at my funeral. I'm sure I would be at your funeral.
I've got a few things to say.
Yeah. Oh, I'd be curious as to what you'd have to say. But I just spoke at someone's funeral the other day, actually. It was really fascinating, that the opportunity to reflect on someone's life. But if you stopped your life right now, what is it that you think you would be leaving behind?
What would I be leaving behind?
How would you want to be remembered?
Ideally, as somebody who cared. I think that's the most important thing, that someone who loved being around people, loved sharing an enthusiasm for life, and genuinely cared for what I was doing, who I was talking to, who I was with, and that I know how infectious that is for me when I feel like somebody else comes in and imbues me with that sort of energy. And I want that to be what people thought about me. You know, he genuinely cared, I think, because I do. And I think that it's, the world of media and celebrity is really, really disposable. And it's, and when you do high profile job like I do, and I understand the reality of that, it's very easy to get caught up in that and to be confused with just sort of sitting on the top of something, but not actually, getting your hands dirty. And I think I've always been somebody that's enjoyed getting my hands dirty, being part of something. For me, being part of something is not just being the front of it. It's being in it, it's involving as many people as possible. And I get an enormous sense of achievement from that.
From what? Caring and just...
Yeah, and sort of nurturing the idea that people come along and creating something that's going to last way beyond me being here.
So of all the people that have interviewed people in the world, you must be one of those people who's interviewed so many famous people from all different walks of life. Just give us an idea of who some of those people are who really stood out to you, that you were like maybe even sitting opposite them going, I can't believe I'm sitting opposite you.
I mean, you're absolutely right. I have, whether it's prime ministers or movie stars, Tom Hanks, Madonna, you go to football, Jose Mourinho, whoever they may be, like prime ministers of countries or presidents of countries. But the people that stand out to me very often aren't those people. The people that stand out to me are the Quajos of this world. Harry Moseley is a great example, who's in the book, and his mum Georgie. And this is something that's really pertinent to you, of course, because of what Hannah went through. But Harry had a terminal brain tumour, had brain cancer, and from the age of 8 or 9, decided he wanted to try and make a difference, not for him, but for other people that were going through it, and he wanted to try and raise some money for his friend Robert, who was this late middle-aged man that he met on the cancer ward, who was really ill and struggling. And Harry created his own charity, Help Harry Help Others, because he wanted to try and improve other people's lives. And at no point was Harry's charity and fundraising ever about Harry. It was always about other people. It was always about how can he do something to make sure somebody else doesn't go through what he's having to go through. He was an extraordinary human being in such a young boy's body. He had this take on life. He created a business model whereby he turned around to his mum. He came up with this idea. He turned around to his mum, Georgie. He said, "Mum, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to make bracelets, little beaded bracelets, and I'm going to sell them." And he started doing that. And then he said, "Now I want to go into schools. I want to talk to kids of my age about what I'm going through. And I want to inspire them. And I'm going to sell them the raw materials, so the elastic and the beads. And they're going to buy that from me. And I'm going to make some money for my charity from that. But then they're going to sell it for their own charities." So he created this business model around the idea of charitable giving in terms of, like, don't just buy this from me, make this for the charities that are important to you and your family. So suddenly he's getting all these kids of his age into the idea of being charitable and raising money for causes that are important to them. He was doing talks in schools, in businesses. I met him at a Sevi Ballesteros dinner.
Another brain tumour.
Exactly. So Sevi's foundation was having a dinner that I was hosting. Harry was the keynote speaker at 10 in front of 1,000 people, including Darren Clark and Matteo, what's his name? The Mancero, the Italian golfer.
Yeah.
All these golfers were there, and Harry was the keynote speaker, talking about what he's going through and why.
So humbling, hey?
Oh my! It was the most remarkable thing. He finished his talk, and I'd done it with him, and he struggled a little bit on the night, and immediately the auctioneer went, "Right, so who's going to donate £1,000 for Harry right now?" Straight away, 55 people stood up, like straight away. In that instant, in that moment, and there was a lot of money in the room, it was a big dinner, £55,000 was raised just off the back of Harry. He was so inspiring. And still for Harry, it was never about him. It was about other people that were going to go through it. And sadly, we lost Harry just over 10 years ago, but it's the 20th anniversary this year of Help Harry Help Others. And Harry's mum, Georgie, has kept his legacy going. And it's developed, what they've done is developed so much broader in terms of looking after people who are going through cancer, looking after the families of people who are going through cancer, helping families, because if you suddenly, as Georgie and her family found, if suddenly you've got a child or a member of the family who is suffering with long-term cancer illness, that has a huge impact on your earning potential. So you suddenly can't pay your bills, you can't pay your rent, you can't pay your electricity bills. So they've set up a part of the charities to support people through that side of the situation. Siblings, to help siblings with the issues that come about when you've got a young family member or a young brother or sister who is going through cancer. You know, wig fitting, bra fitting for people who've had mastectomies. The legacy of this young lad lives on so vividly now, Pete. But they're the people that I remember. Like, don't get me wrong, I love film stars. You know, I love sportsmen. Johnny Wilkinson, Martin Johnson. Those people, they are, you know, Mark Noble. You know, any of those people from my era. Paolo Di Canio. They're the people I love, and there's a real thrill for me to interview those people. The ones that I remember, the ones that stay with me, are the ones that are doing it because, you know what, they're just driven to do what they want to do, or they do it.
I think there's a level of depth sometimes. I mean, it's interesting because if you asked 1,000 people, would you rather meet, you know, this young boy who's not here anymore, but let's say he was still here, would you rather meet Madonna? You know, most people would go to the fame and the adulation.
Yeah.
But
she's well recognized, global name, and don't get me wrong, meeting her was a real experience.
Yeah,
I mean, it was an extraordinary experience and a great challenge interviewing her as well. And I loved it, and I loved being able to share that story. But
why was it challenging?
Because she doesn't suffer fools. I mean, you know, it was release of an album. It was probably about 10 years ago now, and she sort of, you know, she is a incredibly focused, talented, driven, ambitious person. And she was going to sit down, and only a few interviews got granted. And I think the interviewer before me went out in tears because she was there. She's like, you know, bring your A game. You're interviewing Madonna. Let's make this an interesting chat. And I loved it. It was brilliant because it was a real test. And I really enjoyed the opportunity of talking to her and really digging into sort of the album that she was doing and who she is and what she's going on we sat down and she immediately changed all the lights. Like, they'd been planning, the guys in the room. I mean, you've got guys here, but the guys in the room and the girls had set up the room and they'd lit it and all that. She's literally sat down and went, right, that's not any good. That's no good. We're going to have to move that over there. And I'm sitting really close to her in this really small hotel room, and she's directing everybody around. The control, the sort of the sense of vision she has for things was really impressive, but could be really intimidating as well. Had I not had the experience I had of interviewing lots of people, whether it be politicians or whether it be business leaders or whether it be people with a cause that's really, really important to them. So I was able to really enjoy that process and think, right, come on, then this is going to be great. And it was a really fascinating experience, and I loved it. I really, really loved it. But you said, who are the people that stay with me?
Yeah. I think there's something great about shining a light on other people. It was MLK Day a few days ago, and Martin Luther King, everyone knows that he said, I have a dream. But he also said the most important question we should be asking each other is, what can I do for you? And that question, I asked that question of a lot of people, what can I do for you? And it's just opened doors that you wouldn't even believe, to buying a farm for someone in Uganda who looks after 101 children, just by asking that question, what can I do for you? So I want to ask you just a few more questions. And one is actually about something you spoke about, which is speaking, because you've been speaking and presenting for a long time. I just want to ask you a few questions about that. But just in terms of what we can do for you, what is it, all the people that listen to this, what can we all do for you in return for what you've given us?
The essence of the book is about sharing hope and sharing joy. If you want to ask what you can do for me, just carry on doing that. Look for the positive, share the positive, be optimistic. If you're interested in having a look at the book, I'd be thrilled. But I'm thrilled because the people in the book, the campaigns, the extraordinary feats that have been achieved are testament to what happens when human spirit is pushed in the right direction. I don't doubt they'll be inspired by it as well. And I love the fact that we can share that, and I can share that with the listeners of your podcast, because I know that they'll read it and they will be inspired, and hopefully it'll make them smile. And one or two of them may go, that sounds like the sort of thing that I might be interested in. And if they could do it, maybe I could do it too. Because the difference it makes to people's lives is immeasurable, but the difference it will make to their lives is even more powerful.
We're all in a story-making business, right? This is our lives. We met through working together on television. Our stories of our lives have come together. They've come apart. They've come back together again. But ultimately, the story continues. My request is for people to buy the book, and then when they've read it, give it to someone else.
Yeah.
Or stick it in a doctor's surgery, or just give it to someone who don't even, a random stranger, because these are the sorts of stories, I think, for many people, that's just what they need to hear. They need to hear hope. What I've observed with people who are going through something difficult is when they hear someone else who's been through something difficult, it just puts a bit of light into a dark situation.
And belief that they'll get through it, that it'll pass. I was listening to Charlie Mackesay, who is the author that wrote The Boy, the Horse, the Fox, and I can't remember what it is.
Isn't that a children's book?
Yeah. Well, I mean, is it a children's book? It's a beautiful book regardless, with beautiful illustration. It's an amazing story.
Yeah.
About, and I watched an interview with him, and he signs the book and leaves it on bus stops, saying, this is for you, hope you have a good day. And he just leaves his book for people to read on a bus stop. Sharing it like that, I think, is a really special thing to be able to do, to surprise someone in their life. So you're absolutely right. Read it, enjoy it, then pass it on to somebody else you think might enjoy it as well. Because that's it's an incredible gift to share hope, isn't it? And joy. And I think the book is, my experience of it, the book is full of joy and hope.
You've seen that film, Amelie? You know, Amelie. Like, when she does all those things for other people.
Yeah.
And she doesn't want them to know. She's just being a good human being.
Humble about it.
Humble. Let's just talk finally just about one area that you just brought up with, which I'm really fascinated about. And it's the whole presenting and speaking. Just give us an idea of how long have you been in the presenting?
Cool. Crikey. So I kind of started in telly in about 1999, so just before 2000. So coming up for 23 years, I guess, 23, 24 years.
And who taught you how to present and kind of get up and... Because I've watched you present. Do you look at it like a skill? Is it something you were born with, the capability of just being able to present and speak?
I don't think so. Who has taught me? No one's taught me anything, but I have learned an awful lot from the people that I work with. I've been very lucky because I have worked with some extraordinary broadcasters, some brilliant interviewers, some great presenters. Kate, who you know, of course, Garraway, Susanna Reid, Fiona Phillips, Jenny Faulkner, who I worked with way back, Margarita Taylor when we launched T4 many years ago. People with experience. I think the one thing I've always been really open to is learning and listening. And I've been very fortunate. I've worked with some brilliant journalists, some brilliant broadcasters, and sitting alongside them, learning and listening and watching them has taught me an awful lot. None of them set out to teach me how to do what I do, but I've learned an awful lot from them. The person that gave me my first break in TV was Andy Peters. So Andy Peters, I did an audition for Andy Peters, who is now on screen again, but at the time, around 2000, wasn't. He was working behind the scenes at ITV and then at Channel 4. And he saw me do an audition and he said, I think you could come and do this for me, Ben. And we launched T4 many years ago. And Andy was hugely influential at the start of my career. And then we drifted apart, and now we've come back together because we work together a lot more on Good Morning Britain now. And has always been a real mentor for me with regards to broadcasting. Is it something... I think you've got to, for me, as a broadcaster, as a presenter, as a journalist, you've got to be naturally inquisitive. You've got to be interested in other people. You've got to have more interest in someone else than I have in myself. I'd much rather hear what you've got to say about something rather than share my opinion on it, because I want to listen, I want to learn, and I want to be able to share what I've heard like that. And that inquisitive nature is something you can't teach. That's got to be innate in somebody, I think.
So we obviously live in a world where the whole media thing has changed. So when you started, Facebook probably wasn't a thing.
No, it wasn't. No, none of that.
Twitter, and now we've got all of these platforms. Like you've obviously built a big following on Instagram and on Twitter.
Sure.
What would you say to people that want, because we've all got an opportunity to be heard.
Yeah.
What would you say to people who, any advice you'd give to people that have got a message or something they want to tell the world?
There are amazing opportunities, amazing platforms now to share that message in a way that we couldn't. When I started in television, it was all linear. It was all TV. It was terrestrial TV at that. And then the advent of sort of more options became digitally. I was talking to someone just the other day who's really keen to get into presenting, and she looking for opportunities. I'm like, you don't need to be on television anymore to be a presenter. Just start presenting. Everybody's got a camera on their phone. Everyone's got the ability to post that somewhere. If you've got something you want to share and say, start saying it, start sharing it. And if it's the sort of thing that people are going to be interested in, they're going to be drawn to it. They will find it. And then that can amplify what it is that you want to say. You just got to start somewhere. You've got to start. You've got to start, and you've got to be willing to make mistakes. One of the things I was very fortunate enough was I learned my TV experience came about without social media. I mean, it's a brutal world now. To start where I was starting and what I was doing back then, I'm a very different person on television now than I was 20 years ago. But who would do a job and 20 years later be the same as they were? Do you know what I mean? I learned in front of a lot of people. Fortunately, they could send an email or they could phone the duty log, but they couldn't get to me directly. And I'm incredibly grateful for that, because that would have been really, really hard. And I see young people starting now, and they have to be so resilient to criticism, because everybody loves to be critical all the time. But the opposite of that, the other side to that is there's an amazing platform for you to find your voice, to find your tribe, to find those people that you want to speak to. And you don't necessarily need to do it the way that I did it, because there are so many more platforms, so many more opportunities.
So when you look back to how you were 20 years ago, what's different between who you are now and who you were then?
Confidence is a huge thing. Experience is massive. You can't, experience is a huge teacher. Making mistakes, learning from mistakes, making sure you don't do them again. There's that thing when you're doing broadcasting live television, above the surface, you're like the swan, you're elegant. Below the surface, you're paddling away. And I think that is learning how to cope in live scenarios. I'm pretty adept at managing all sorts of things, because lots of things have gone wrong along the way, and you have to cope with that. And it's learning to cope in that sort of scenario. No different to if you're in an office and there's things are going on. No different if you're in a classroom and you're teaching. No different if you're somewhere else. We all learn on the job, right? It's just that the job that I do is much more visible.
So if you could go back and give your younger self some advice, what advice would you give in terms of presenting and speaking?
Take your time. Don't rush. Don't be so impatient. Open your ears. Open your eyes. Keep smiling. You know, it's intense. It's an amazing environment. I absolutely love it, but it's pretty intense. And I think that I was always in a huge rush to get to where I wanted to be, rather than soaking in every sort of moment and really making sure I had dotted the I's and crossed the T's. In my rush to get to where I wanted to be, I wasn't necessarily making the most of every opportunity that came along. And I think I tell myself to slow down a little bit, look around, keep your eyes open. Because, you know, when I started, I'd make loads of mistakes. I was making mistakes all the time. But I guess that's part of learning on the job. You've got to be able to make mistakes in order to succeed.
So, a couple more questions. You know, when did you ever present? You present to big audiences now as well, like in
Live, yeah.
live.
Yeah.
No, not on television, but in
Corporate, yeah.
corporate.
Yeah. Or when we do Ninja, there's about 1,000 people in the audience when we're doing Ninja Warrior, for example. But yes, in terms of a live audience or a live crowd, yeah.
And is that again skills that you had to learn how to kind of get get an audience to feel a particular emotion, get them on your side?
Yeah, exactly. All of those things, but also having confidence in what you're doing. I think what I know now, I've done enough things in the past where I wasn't completely assured of what I was going to go and do, and an audience can see that and smell that straight away. And as soon as they're nervous for you, it can collapse, because they need to have confidence in what you're going to be saying, and the confidence of the person who's on screen, the person who's on stage. So making sure I'm completely across everything that I'm going to go and share with people. I have total confidence in what I'm going to share. And as soon as you can exude that, as soon as you can go out and do that, people will listen to what you've got to say, because they will be able to relax and just listen to your words rather than panic because he looks uneasy, he looks nervous. That's the worst thing in the world, is when you see somebody in front of a crowd and they look nervous, because you suddenly feel nervous for them, and you're not concentrating then on what they're saying. You're worried about how they're feeling, and you want to listen to what they're saying, what they've got to say. I love moderating big conferences and things like that now, because I find it really, really inspiring. Love being in front of people. I love listening to what speakers have to say, and then sort of gleaning what I can from whatever it is that they're sharing wherever we are.
So it's interesting, because you said earlier on about how you've spent a lot of your life. So let's not make it about me. I'm interested in you, and you have to do that in your job, right? To ask people the right questions. But it seems like through everything you've been through, your message has come to the fore, which is your message is about caring and shining a light on other people who are doing great work, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't have been able to write a book about myself. I would have no confidence in writing a book about myself, because I'd have no confidence in the belief that people would be interested. I'm really confident in writing books about people with great stories. You know, you're talking about being storytellers. I love sharing things that have inspired me and make me enthusiastic. I think it's one of the reasons I got into TV presenting, because if I saw a film that I loved, or I saw a band that I loved, or I saw a play that I loved, or I heard a story and I saw it, being able to share that with people was an incredibly powerful thing. That's what I've been able to do with Humble Heroes, is I can share other people's stories and I can shine light on them, because I find that far more gratifying. I get far more from that than I would if I was talking about myself.
So this book on miracles, that's going to happen?
No, it's purely because we've been talking about it. I mean, look, there are extraordinary things that have happened that can't necessarily be explained, and they are as bewildering and as inspiring and as extraordinary and magical and miraculous as that. And I think that, you know, that's an incredibly powerful thing, isn't it? When you, I mean, if you talk about Hannah's story, he's a great example. He's somebody that to all intents and purposes, medically, she shouldn't be with us. And yet she is. Something's happened along the way. She has found some hope from somewhere. You've been able to get this medication, this treatment, because you refused to accept that was the answer. I'm not saying that's always the case, and very sadly that sometimes that doesn't happen. But, you know, there's nothing like a bit of hope to give people the idea that things are worth fighting for.
Absolutely. Ben, can I ask you to sign this book? Actually, I've got a little card for you. Look, Michael Jordan. That's a collector's item. I know I'm a massive fan of Michael Jordan.
You forgot that was in there, didn't you?
Yeah. There you go. You know me too well. I really appreciate this opportunity to shine a light on shining the light on the people that you've shone a light on, because I don't think there's anything better in life than to tell good stories. So my recommendation to everyone is please buy the book, but at the same time, when you've read it, pass it on to somebody else, pass on the goodwill.
Yeah. Thanks, Pete.
It's a pleasure.
It's lovely to see you. Thank you for coming and talking about this as well, because I love, it's been one of the most enjoyable things to do, because often when I'm doing interviews, it's about TV shows or bits and pieces. To be able to share this is something I'm really passionate about. These people deserve
They're stars.
all the credit they can get, because they don't look for it. They don't want it. So if we can shine a light on them, there'll be people in here undoubtedly that some of the people, your listeners, will go, oh my goodness, I need something like that, or I've seen something like that, or that's something that's touched me. I didn't realize that was out there. That's an amazing project. That's a fantastic campaign. Goodness me, they're doing that. That's miraculous. That's remarkable. And it could change somebody's life. And that's all we want, isn't it?
Well, maybe you can also connect me to some of those people, because if possible, I'd love to do some podcasts with them.
Oh, yeah.
These are the stories I just really want to get out into the world. So thank you so much, Ben.
My pleasure, Peter.
Let's do it again sometime, yeah?
Let's do.
Go for the hat trick.
Oh, yes. Stiff nipple triple.